This is a video about upgrades, or more like a video about should you upgrade, because I keep getting questions like this. Should I upgrade from this wheel or pedals to the new other ones? And with the release of the Podium DD, a lot of viewers have been asking about this too. Should I upgrade from the DD1 or Club Sport DD into the Podium DD? It is very common. Well, let's be honest about this. I don't know if you should upgrade. No reviewer knows if you should upgrade, and anyone that says that you should upgrade to anything, unless there's a deep knowledge of each case, it's likely to be talking out of their ass. However, that doesn't mean there isn't a reason to upgrade, so let's talk about that in this video. But before going there, a big thank you to all the viewers, members, and subscribers for all the continuous support. Without you, videos like these wouldn't be possible. I'm also trying to get 100,000 subscribers. It's really not that far away, so if you press like and subscribe, that would help the channel a lot. Thank you so much. Also, have a look at my affiliate links below and my Amazon stores. When people ask whether they should upgrade or not, the first thing I realize is that I usually don't know why they want to upgrade, and that matters more than the upgrade itself. In PC hardware, the reason is often obvious. New games come out, the performance tanks, the frame times go sideways, you keep getting those settings back to low and very low, and eventually the experience degrades in a way that is measurable and unavoidable. The software moves forward, the hardware doesn't, and the gap becomes visible. You don't really need to make excuses or philosophize about it. If your GPU or CPU can't run the thing anymore, well, that's the answer for you. However, sim racing hardware doesn't really behave like that. The law of diminishing returns it's really fast, and much faster than people expect, and much faster than in most other hobbies. A very basic four-seat back wheel already does the core job. It tells you what the front tires are doing well enough to drive consistently. A very basic load cell brake already lets you brake by force instead of by travel, which is one of the biggest performance jumps you can do in sim racing, and that happens really early and not late. Take wheelbases for example. There's a narrative that older or lower end bases are somehow holding people back in a hard performance limiting way, but when you actually look at it, what's happening on track, well, that's rarely true. A T300RS or a G29, these bases still have enough usable information that with trained driving, the inconsistencies can be compensated for almost subconsciously. You learn the wheel, you learn the noise, you learn where it clips, where it goes light, how it behaves over the curbs, how it talks under load, and once you do that, the hardware stops being a moving target and becomes a fixed reference. At that point, the driver is doing far more work than the equipment. And from that point onwards, most upgrades are not about unlocking something fundamentally new. They're about refinement, resolution, smoothness, consistency, comfort. And comfort is really important. Those things matter, but they matter in very different ways depending on the driver. And this is why sim racing upgrades aren't generational in the same way PC upgrades are. Old gear isn't suddenly invalidated, it doesn't stop functioning just because some other newer gear exists. At most of the time, newer gear isn't offering more information, it's offering something a little bit different. Wheelbases like the Logitech G series still exist because, well, they still work to a very good standard. Which honestly brings us to the difference between wants and needs, and this is where observation matters. People are free to do whatever they want with their money. I'm not gonna argue that, it's not up to debate. If you want something because it looks good or feels good, or you're simply enjoying owning nice gear or particular gear, that's enough of a reason. We can talk about that and the minuscule differences between ecosystems, subtle front end feel until the end of the universe. There's no problem about it. You don't need permission, justifications, or even a performance argument. Enjoyment is valid. Do what you want. But when the question is framed, should I upgrade? That implies a problem that needs solving, and that's where I can say, I don't know, buddy. Because a real needs usually shows as objective limitation, not a vague feeling. I've mentioned my phone in the past before in another video, and honestly, the phone is like 4 years old now. It still works, it takes good photos, memory is still plenty to use, great screen, love it. It's gotten the broken at the back, though it's still not a reason to change. Objectively, what is a reason to change this phone? Well, it is the battery. It's getting borked, which means objectively I can measure that the battery life reduces the usability of the thing. If I have to charge the phone multiple times a day, if I want to keep it until the end of the day running, well, that's something that limits me. But sim racing doesn't work like this in most cases. If your ecosystem locks you out of wheels you want to run, or rims you want to try, or platforms you want to move to, that's really not theoretical, that's a real constraint. If expanding your setup means replacing half of it anyways, because you're gonna upgrade later on in life, upgrading earlier can actually make sense to you. And power can also be a genuine need, but only in specific circumstances. If you are running heavier rims, larger diameter wheels, or you're consistently hitting the ceiling of your base because of the way you drive or run the sims, then yes, for example, torque headroom can become functional. It's not emotional. It's something that you can observe. It's something you can see clipping. It's something you can feel the compression in your steering wheel. You can test this. Another way is ergonomics. These are legitimate issues as well. I've sent pedals back because I couldn't run with them. If your pedals don't adjust enough to fit your seating position, or if your brake travel forces awkward angles in your ankles, if fatigue sets in because the hardware fights your body instead of working with it, well, that's not about lap time, that's about sustainability. And sustainability matters far more than most people want to admit. These are needs. They exist whether you want them to or not. Okay, what's interesting is how people upgrade without any of those issues being present, and I'm not judging here. Most equipment within the same tier, or even between tiers, they remarkably work in similar ways. The difference will exist, of course, but they are often smaller than the internet would have you believe, or what Redditors will tell you. And this is even true when you start looking at a lot of outdated hardware, especially once you start looking at older generations, and a lot of that outdated hardware still sits very comfortably within the same functional envelope as modern equivalents, to the point you can go to eBay or secondhand markets and you get older stuff that is a few years old and it works very similar to the new thing. The example of the new Podium DD is actually a good one because it sits right next to the Club Sport DD Plus in terms of performance, over it in power, and replaces the old DD1 and DD2. Yes, it is an upgrade over both systems, and it's noticeable against the old DD1s, less so against the Club Sport DD Plus. However, if you ask me if you should upgrade or is it worthwhile to upgrade, I wouldn't be able to tell you because in my opinion most of these systems work more than well enough, and I would be perfectly happy if you're still using the DD1 or the Club Sport DD. When you start looking at the problem of upgrades like that, it's why it's so hard to recommend upgrades blindly, because if the existing gear isn't creating an observable problem, something you can measure, the upgrade isn't solving one. It's changing the experience a little bit, but really not fixing it. And realistically, we have to be quite honest here, it isn't doing jack shit. And that's where the expectations of hardware upgrades can get quite dangerous, because if you upgrade expecting lap time or consistency or racecraft to suddenly improve, you're putting a lot of responsibility in the wrong place, because hardware won't teach you better braking technique, it doesn't really fix overdriving, it doesn't make you more patient in traffic, it doesn't definitely make you a better hypercar driver if you ask me. It doesn't suddenly give you a race awareness, and those things actually scale with practice, not torque or generation. In many cases, even if you're talking about upgrades, upgrading can actually introduce a temporary regression because you have a new feel in your pedals or steering wheels or whatever, new response, you get new references, the driver, you need to recalibrate, and until you do, performance can get worse. That doesn't mean the hardware is bad, it means learning is happening again, and with pedals this is even more the case because there's so much to change physically. So one of the guidelines I keep coming back to is this one. If you can't clearly articulate what your current hardware is preventing you from doing, upgrading is unlikely to give you what you think it will. And there's another guideline as well. If the issue disappears when you adapt your driving, it probably wasn't a hardware issue to begin with. And this doesn't mean, however, that upgrades are pointless. It's far from that. Refinement matters, your comfort matters, your enjoyment of the sim matters, the smoothness of equipment matters, but those are personal values. They're not universal truths. And that's why I hesitate when somebody asks me directly whether they should upgrade or not, because unless the reason is extremely clear, any answer I give is really just projecting my values and my experience onto their situation. And honestly, my values are generally, I really don't know. What I'd rather see people doing is observing their own circumstances. Have a look at your sim rig and ask yourself, do I really need this? What is wrong with my current setup objectively? Work from the small parts and cheaper parts to the bigger ones and most expensive ones. That's what they do in garages when they're troubleshooting car problems, and it really works remarkably well with our hobby. Sim racing hardware is mature and has been mature for quite a while, and it's more mature than people think. We're not in a phase where every new generation validates the last. We're in a phase of incremental polish, and sometimes what is polished, and I'm telling you this as a reviewer, it's a marketing turd, while the current and previous generations on equipment was already pretty good enough. If you're looking at the sim racing market or the upgrades market in this way, in this pragmatic way, the conversation changes entirely. And if you treat it in that way, upgrades become a calmer decision. You'll have fewer regrets, you get fewer expectations, and ironically, you often better results with spouses as well. That's important. And not because the gear is better, but because the reason for changing, your equipment, it finally makes sense. And because your spouses will stop asking why you spent money this month again in sim racing equipment for the 12th month in a row. I know that our rigs are never finished, but anyways, I'm here for giving sim racing tips, but apparently I'm also here giving some tip-top marriage tips, so subscribe for more.